Hello everyone and welcome to EduTap. In this video, we are going to talk about certain important MCQs related to the subject of freedom movement and Indian Union, which can be seen in the upcoming ESIC Deputy Director exam. Before starting with this video, let me again remind you that if you are new on this channel, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and also like this video. Stay till end on this video, and if you like the content that I'm discussing with you, please do like this video and also share it with your friends and aspirants, and do not forget to join the Telegram channel. On this channel we provide you with all the PDFs of all the sessions on our YouTube channel absolutely free of cost, so that you can use them afterwards for your revision purposes, right? So without any delay, let us start discussing these questions. This is the 15th such session, let you be reminded, and therefore we have discussed more than 150 such questions from the subject of freedom movement and Indian Union, which can be very helpful for the upcoming examination as well as for revision for this particular subject. So question number 1 is in front of you right now. Who came to be known as the father of communal electorate in India? So communal electorate is a very important and controversial subject which was introduced during the 20th century, the early part of the 20th century in India, and it was a divide and rule policy of the Britishers, which was materializing through this particular initiative, where they wanted different electorates, separate people to vote for their own leaders, so that every other community, be it Muslims, be it Sikhs, be it depressed classes, they should vote for their own candidates, right? So who is the father of communal electorate? Options are Montagu, Minto, Cornwallis, or Wellesley. So if you want to answer this particular question, remind yourselves, try to remember, when was the first provision for communal electorate introduced into India? It was done in 1909, and this was done by Minto, Lord Minto, and he was known for the Act of 1909, also known as the Morley-Minto reforms, and he introduced the system of communal representation for Muslims. So all the Muslim subjects, all the Muslim citizens of the country, they will vote for the Muslim leaders, and the other communities, for example Hindu community, they will vote for their own leaders. And they through this method, what Britishers wanted to do was, they wanted to divide the Indian communities, and they wanted to weaken the Indian freedom struggle and nationalist movement. So this act legalized communalism. It gave recognition, legal recognition, to the aspirations of different communal elements in the Indian society. So who is the father of communal electorates? He is Lord Minto, who was the viceroy or the governor general at that time. Next up, question number 2. In the context of Indian history, the principle of diarchy refers to what? We have discussed about this particular subject, diarchy, a lot many times in the previous videos also. Diarchy, what does this term mean? Option A, division of the central legislature into two houses. So the division of legislature into two houses, this is not known as diarchy, it is known as bicameralism. Right, fairly easy. We know that bicameralism is basically when there are two different houses in the legislature. For example, in our parliament also, we have a Lok Sabha, that is a lower house, as well as a House of Representatives, also known as Rajya Sabha. So there are two different houses with a different set of members. This is known as bicameralism, two houses in a particular legislature. Option B, introduction of double government, that is central and state governments. Central and state governments, this is not diarchy, this is basically federalism, right, where we divide the powers of governance into different federal units, into different provinces, and there is one central government who is in control of the entire union. That is federalism, not diarchy. Option number C, having two sets of rulers, one in London and another in Delhi, so that there is a one ruler in London who is the sovereign, who is the queen or the king of the Britain, and another one in Delhi who will be the governor general or the leader of India. This is again not diarchy, this is dual rule. But actually what diarchy means is that the subjects which are delegated to provinces, they were being divided into two categories. Before 1935 Act in India, what happened was, certain subjects, they were devolved to the provinces. The legislatures in the provinces, the officials in the provinces, they were empowered to make rules and execute decisions on those particular subjects. But what Britishers did was, they divided these subjects into two different lists. One was reserved and one was transferred. So the subjects in reserved list, they were absolutely reserved for the governor of that particular province. Only the executive and the legislators, the people who were elected to the legislative assemblies of those provinces, they had no say in these particular subjects. They were reserved subjects, and some subjects they were transferred to the legislatures, so that elected representatives, the members of the legislatures, they could make certain rules, they could enforce certain decisions on these transferred subjects. So there is only one government, but the powers to make rules, the powers to enforce decisions, they were divided into two. One was reserved with the governor, and one was delegated or transferred to the members of the legislative assemblies. So this is the term this is the meaning of the term diarchy. That means twice rule or double rule, right? So this is option number D. Next up is question number 3. Question number 3 is coming up with three different statements, and you have to consider these statements about the events occurring in 1930s to 40s. Right, so the later half of the freedom struggle, there are three statements which are available to us, and we have to identify the correct statements out of these three. Statement 1 says Pune Pact gave away the Hindu joint electorate and reserves special electorates to the depressed classes. We have read about Pune Pact earlier also, that this was a pact which was signed on or agreed upon between Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And Mahatma Gandhi, as we know, he was on a fast unto death. He wanted no separate electorates for the depressed classes, while Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he wanted separate electorates for the depressed classes. That means Ambedkar ji wanted that all the depressed sections of the society, they should vote for their own leaders. No upper castes or no general caste people should vote for the leaders of the depressed classes, while Gandhi ji said that we should not separate the electorates, we should not fragment the electorate. What we must do is we should provide reservations for the seats of depressed classes, and those depressed leaders, the leaders of those depressed classes will also be voted into the legislature by the entire general community. All the people, be it from depressed classes or the so-called upper classes, they will vote for the single leader. So in the Pune Pact, they did not give away the Hindu joint electorate. They voted in favor of the joint electorate. Ambedkar also agreed that yes, all the joint electorate, all the people belonging to any of the classes but belonging to the Hindu community, they will vote for their own leaders. Certain seats will be reserved for the depressed classes, and this provision is also followed even today in the parliament. Also in the Lok Sabha also, certain seats are reserved for scheduled castes or for scheduled tribes, and they are voted in by the general population also. So there is no separate electorates. This does not mean that general people will vote for general leaders, and depressed sections, scheduled castes or scheduled tribes, they will vote for their own leaders. This is not the case. So this statement is wrong. In the Pune Pact, they did not agree to separate electorates. They agreed for a joint electorate. Option number 2, statement number 2, C. Rajagopalachari became the first Governor General of the Dominion of India. After India got independence in 1947, for a very brief moment of time, India was converted into a dominion, and the first Governor General of this dominion was Mountbatten. Mountbatten was the last Viceroy and the first Governor General of Dominion India or the Free India. So whenever you are asked a question about who was the last Governor General or Viceroy of India, you will say the last Viceroy of India was Lord Mountbatten. But if the question is who is the last Governor General of India or Free India, then the answer will be C. Rajagopalachari. So Rajagopalachari was elected or was appointed the Governor General after Mountbatten. Okay, so he was not the first Governor General, but Mountbatten was the first Governor General after 15 August 1947 for a brief moment of time, brief period of time, and after that C. Rajagopalachari was appointed as the Governor General of India until the Constitution came into force in 26th January 1950. Then India was constituted into a republic, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the first president of our country. Okay. Statement number 3. The members of the interim government were members of the Viceroy's Executive Council, and the council came to be vice chaired by Jawaharlal Nehru. This statement is actually correct. Only the third statement here is correct. The members of the interim government, one interim government was appointed under the presidentship or the chairmanship of the Governor General or the Viceroy, and Jawaharlal Nehru, he was the vice chairman of this council. So in effect, he was the Prime Minister of India. This is not the correct technical term. Let me remind you that he was not the Prime Minister at that period of time. He was only the Vice Chairman of the Executive Council of the Viceroy. The Chairman of the Council of the Viceroy was obviously the Viceroy, and the Vice Chairman was Jawaharlal Nehru. And there were other important leaders of the Congress also who were part of this particular interim government. Clear? Next, question number 4. Who was the first president of Swaraj Party? Swaraj Party, we know about this. We have also learned about Swaraj Party and discussed many questions about this, and we have also read about the important leaders who are associated with the Swaraj Party. This party broke away from Congress on the issue of participation into the legislatures. Congress, mainstream Congress, various leaders of the Congress, they were not in favor of contesting the elections and gaining entry into the legislative councils. But certain leaders who were moderate leaders of the Congress, they wanted to contest elections. They wanted to reform the Indian governance system from the inside, and they wanted to be part of the Indian Legislative Council so that they can pass certain laws, they can bring some betterment into the lives of Indian people. Who was the first president of the Swaraj Party? Options are Chittaranjan Das, Motilal Nehru, C. Rajagopalachari, and D. Behramji Malabari. The correct answer here is Chittaranjan Das. The first president was Chittaranjan Das of Swaraj Party, and the first secretary was Motilal Nehru. Right, so these were the two prominent leaders who formed the Swaraj Party. And Chittaranjan Das, he was the senior leader and he was also the president of the party. And Motilal Nehru, he was the first secretary of the party. Clear? Next up is the question number 5. Question number 5 is in front of you now. This question is related to the Quit India movement. Read very carefully the question. Which one of the following observations is not true, is incorrect about the Quit India movement of 1942? Option A, it was a non-violent movement. Actually, the Quit India movement, it started as a non-violent movement, but very soon it got turned into a violent movement because there were sporadic incidences of violence in different parts of the country. So therefore we cannot say this was entirely a non-violent movement. This is not the case, right? So it is not true that it is a non-violent movement, right? Option B, it was led by Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was the leader of the Quit India movement, but you must remember that when he declared and when he gave the call for do or die and when he declared the Quit India movement's beginning, he and many other leaders of Congress, they were arrested and they were sent into prison. So there was no one leader who could lead the movement from the front, and therefore we cannot say that it was led by Mahatma Gandhi. Option C says it was a spontaneous movement. It was a spontaneous movement. That means that all the people in different parts of the country, they were doing the movement on their own. There was no planning for the movement. No leaders of Congress or no leaders of different units of Congress at the regional level were participants in this particular movement. This is also not the case. And option D says it did not attract the labor class in general. Yes, it did attract the labor class in general. It did attract labor class in general. It did attract the women. It did attract the children. It did attract the youth. All the different sections of the society, they came and participated in the Quit India movement. So therefore the correct answer of this question will be it was led by Mahatma Gandhi. It was not led by Mahatma Gandhi, right? Question number 6. Which amongst the following provided a common factor for tribal insurrection in India in the 19th century? We know that in the 19th century, that is the time period between 1801 to 1899, there were various tribal movements in different parts of the country, especially the central and eastern India. What was the reason? There were various reasons for different tribal movements, but there was a common factor, one common grievance all across India, why the different tribal populations, they were coming up in rebellion against the British government. Option A, introduction of a new system of land revenue and taxation of tribal products. Option B, influence of foreign religious missionaries in tribal areas. Option C, rise of a large number of money lenders, traders and revenue farmers as middlemen in tribal areas. And option D, the complete disruption of the old agrarian order of the tribal communities. What should be the correct answer? Now be very careful in this kinds of questions. These kinds of questions are not very easy questions to answer. They are quite difficult questions. All these reasons, they were part or they were in part responsible for one tribal movement or another. In some cases there was a new system of land revenue which was not acceptable to the tribal communities. In certain cases there were religious missionaries who were encroaching upon to the customs and lifestyles of the tribal communities. Option C, this is also correct, that there was a rise in large number there was a large number of money lenders who were coming into the tribal areas, and they were enticing the tribal people, and they were enticing them into a debt trap. They were lending them money at exorbitant rates, and then when these tribals, they were not able to repay back the money, they used to confiscate their property or their lands, etc. So this is also one of the cause. But one major cause which was common all along the tribal movements in different parts of the country was that the old agrarian order of the tribal people, it was being disbanded. The lands, the forests, the natural resources on which the tribal communities depended, be it in the South India or the Central India or the Northeastern India or the Eastern India, Britishers, what they did was they occupied upon all these natural resources. They declared all the forests as reserved forests. They did not allow the farmers or the tribals to go into the forest and collect the forest produce. They did not allow the tribals to cultivate the forest land. So that is why this is one of the major cause why the livelihoods of the tribals, they were not being respected, they were not being protected by the British policies, and therefore they rose into the rebellion. Other causes like the introduction of land settlement revenues, introduction of middlemen, introduction of missionary activities, all of them, they just played a role of butter into fire, and they all contributed to the causes of rebellion. But the major cause of rebellion was basically the disruption in the lifestyles of the tribal communities. Okay, next up is the question number 7. Question number 7 says the people of India agitated against the arrival of Simon Commission because. Now this is a fairly simple question to answer. Now we have read about Simon Commission a lot of times, and we have also read about why the different sections of the Indian population, they were against the Simon Commission. Option A, Indians never wanted the review of the Working of Act of 1919. This is not correct. Indians wanted that the 1919 Act, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, they have to be reviewed, and they wanted much more concessions to be given to the Indian leaders and to the Indian masses. Option B, Simon Commission recommended the abolition of diarchy in the provinces. This was not the case. The Simon Commission, when it arrived, it had not made any recommendations. It arrived in India to deliberate upon the 1919 Act. It arrived into India to see the progress of the 1919 Act. It had not made any recommendations then. But still, when it arrived, Indians were against that. Why was it so? Option C, there was no Indian member in the Simon Commission. Now this is the major reason. The Simon Commission, it was an all-white commission. There was no representation from any section of the Indian local population or native population, and that is why Indians thought that how could Britishers, all of the British people, they could decide what is better for Indians. Therefore, they wanted some Indian representations into the Simon Commission, and they boycotted the Simon Commission. Okay, so correct answer of this question will be option number C. Next is the question number 8. This question is related to Mahatma Gandhi. Let us read the question first. Mahatma Gandhi said that some of his deepest convictions were reflected in a book titled Unto This Last, and the book transformed his life. What was the message from the book that transformed Mahatma Gandhi? Unto This Last is a very a special kind of book written by John Ruskin. John Ruskin was a controversial economist, you can say, at that time. He was also a radical activist at that time, and his writings, especially this Unto This Last, these books, they created quite a lot of revelations. And at that time, the colonial powers, they were at their peak, and the capitalist powers, they were also very powerful at that time, and they tried their best to suppress the writings of John Ruskin. But still, John Ruskin's writings, they happened to influence a lot of leaders all throughout the world, including Mahatma Gandhi from India. What was the message in this particular book Unto This Last by John Ruskin? Option A, uplifting the oppressed and poor is the moral responsibility of an educated man. Option B, the good of individual is contained in the good of all. Option C, the life of celibacy and spiritual pursuit are essential for a noble life. And option D says all of the statements A, B, C are correct in this context. Actually, the John Ruskin's Unto This Last book, it focused solely on the new kind of economic order. It said that if we worked for the good of the entire community, then the good of individual is automatically happening. So the correct answer here will be option number B. The good of individual is contained in the good for all, and therefore we can say that he kind of advocated for the communist policies of economy, that the wealth should be distributed among all. The benefit of a single person, if only a single person is getting enriched, if all the resources, if all the capital being generated is being hoarded or accumulated by only a section of small people or small section of people, then this is not the correct use of economy. And he wanted the wealth to be distributed. He wanted all the community to live in harmony, and the good of all, the good of the entire community surpasses the good of a single individual. This was the philosophy behind John Ruskin's Unto This Last, and this influenced Mahatma Gandhi to his core. And he started or set up his farm, the Phoenix Farm, in South Africa, where different people from different races, different nationalities, they came together and they started living in a communion. And therefore Mahatma Gandhi's spiritual journey started from reading this particular book Unto This Last, right? Next up is the second last question of the day, and this question is about Usha Mehta, not widely known freedom fighter, but a very important freedom fighter in the later parts of the freedom struggle. With reference to Indian freedom struggle, Usha Mehta is well known for what? Running the secret Congress radio in the wake of Quit India movement. Option B, participating in the second roundtable conference. Option C, leading a contingent of Indian National Army. And option D, assisting in the formation of interim government under Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So Usha Mehta is basically famous for running the secret Congress radio during the times of Quit India movement, because you know the Quit India movement, this was not an easy time for Indian masses. The World War Second was had started, and Britishers, they desperately wanted the participation of Indian masses, and they wanted the support of Indian masses and Indian leaders into their war effort, and they could not tolerate any any kind of suppression, any kind of revolt, any kind of opposition to their war policies. And therefore, as I told you, they jailed all the important Congress leaders, including Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sarojini Naidu, all of them, Vallabhbhai Patel, all of them into different jails. And they wanted to suppress the Quit India movement. But the underground Congress radio, which was maintained, or which was run by Usha Mehta, it succeeded in mobilizing masses, Indian masses in different parts of the country, and the messages being relayed, the messages of Indian leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, they were being relayed on this Congress radio, and this motivated the masses to continue their struggle in absence of these honorable leaders. And therefore, the correct answer of this question will be option number A, running the secret Congress radio in the wake of Quit India movement. Last question of the day, friends, is about Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha, which he organized for the peasants of Kheda in Gujarat. What was the reason for Mahatma Gandhi to organize a Satyagraha on behalf of the peasants of Kheda? Statement number 1, the administration did not suspend the land revenue collection in spite of a drought. And statement number 2, the administration proposed to introduce permanent settlement in Gujarat. Actually, the Kheda Satyagraha or Kheda movement, which was spearheaded by Mahatma Gandhi and also Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who also participated in this movement, the main demand of the peasants was that the land revenue, which was being demanded by the British authorities, should be suspended, because there was a severe drought that year in the region of Kheda, and there was no agricultural produce. The farmers, they were already under debt, they were already struggling for survival, and they could not pay any revenue to the British authorities, and they demanded this the revenue should be suspended for at least 1 year, so that relief can be granted to the Indian peasants in the Kheda region. There was no provision for introduction of permanent settlement. This was done in the eastern half of the country, in the Bengal region, not the Gujarat region. Right? So the correct answer in this question will be option number A. Only the first statement is correct here. So with this, friends, we are at the end of this particular session, where we have talked about certain MCQs, 10 important MCQs dealing with various aspects of the Indian freedom struggle. And with this, we have also completed 15 such session, and I hope that all these sessions have been helpful for you in revising the concepts of Indian freedom struggle and Indian Union. And we will keep on coming up with these sessions in future also. Please stay with us, keep on growing, keep on learning. Jai Hind and Jai Bharat.